All right, well, we'll get started. This is a Zoom session, obviously, that I'm going to be talking about business writing. I'll also be covering the do's and don'ts of business writing. That's predominantly what I'll cover, but in the process of that, I will be giving some instruction on, what business documents should look like and how they should read and all that. And a couple of just kind of opening comments to make. And the reason I even do this video, you might think, well, if I took English one, I probably learned how to write, different kinds of documents. I learned how to, organize my message. I learned how to do a persuasive message, and there's a lot that we learned when we took our English one class when it comes to composition and mostly focused on writing and a little bit of grammar. But as we move into business writing, obviously many of those rules still apply. You have to keep proper grammar, you have to punctuate properly, you have to have your sentence structure and all that appropriately done. So none of that changes. However, when you were taking English, typically they would tell you write a 5-page report or write a 7-page report. And so you're doing everything you can to cram as much detail as you can into your report because it has to be that long. Business writing is the exact opposite of that. The idea here is that you are going to be whittling it down to really just the clear message that you want to give. It's getting rid of all the extra, all the excess. It's editing it down to what really needs to be said and doing so in a clear, concise, and simple manner. And so all that you did in English kind of goes out the window when it comes to that. Now, again, proper grammar, proper sentence structure, punctuation, all that still applies, but you want to make it simple, clear, and to the point. Also, how your document looks is very important in business writing. In again, writing an essay, you typically did a double spaced document. It was just long paragraphs followed by more long paragraphs. You indented the first line, and everything was double spaced. And that's kind of what an essay naturally came to look like. Well, business writing is the exact opposite of that as well. How it looks is just as important as how it reads. And that's because we're busy. We don't have time to get a document that is just all big, one long paragraph of information, right? Nobody wants to get an email like that. We want to get, or a letter like that. We want to get it to where it's easy to scan and easy to look at. It's pleasing to the eyes. It looks neat. Business writing as well as writing for online channels, web writing, things like that. They always use little chunks, little short paragraphs of information that you can read really quickly all the way down the page. Well, that's so true in business writing. We kind of moved away from long paragraphs and we utilize short single spaced paragraphs. We utilize text design, things like headings, bullet lists, bold text, anything you can do to your document to make it look neat and organized and orderly, and then have little things that your eye can catch as you're making your way down the page. And what does that is, again, things like headings, bold text, bullet list, underline text, italicized text, all that kind of stuff makes your document more readable and what we call have high skim value. You can skim or scan it really easy because your eye catches those things that are highlighted or made to stand out. And so, again, if I send an email or a letter and it's all just plain text, all one big paragraph, or even if it's broken into big, larger paragraphs, even then it's much more difficult to read. You want to make it easy for the people to read it. So keeping it simple, keeping it clear to the point, but also making it visually appealing really is what sets business writing apart from writing an essay or really any other kind of writing. And so those are kind of the key things that I focus on when it comes to business writing. And of course, we want to be aware of things like biases in our language. We want to be careful of things like, using slogans or jargon or slang, things like that that make it unprofessional. So we got to be aware of that as well. I know when you're writing an essay, sometimes you like to be very creative and very descriptive, and maybe you're a writer and you like to write things and you like to write that way. That's fine. But again, in business context, you want to keep it simple and to the point and clear. And clear outweighs creative or nice flowy flowery paragraphs, very descriptive. It's better just to get to the point. So that's really what we're going to talk about in this session. I'm going to kind of go over the do's and don'ts of business writing, and then I'll show you some samples of documents and how they should look. I'll show you a memo, a letter, and an email. I'll show you a little bit about the formatting of those documents, and then I'll also show you how to utilize text design to improve the readability and skim value of your document. So that's what we'll cover. Does anybody have any questions before we begin? All right, if not, I'm going to go ahead and go to the do's and don'ts. What did I do with it? I can't find it. Here we go. All right, hold on 1 second. I think I shrunk it down. All right, here it is. Let me stop sharing here. 1 second. Apologize. I can see it, but you can't. So one more click. And here we go. All right. You should be seeing business writing final Rev 1. And so this is my just scratch list of the do's and don'ts of business writing. And this is kind of what I utilize to teach the topic. And I may explain as I give each one. But notice on my page, I put how it reads 50% and how it looks 50%. And I believe strongly that that is true. You might have a really well-written document, but if it's not laid out on the page in such a way to make it easy to read, your audience that receives that is not going to be happy to get that. But if you do both, if it reads really well and that it looks really well and it's easy to read and scan, then you've won them over and you're going to be seen in your workplace as an excellent communicator when it comes to written documents. So we're going to look at these do's and don'ts one at a time. And the first do and don't is the tone of your document. And this kind of deals with how it reads. And that's what I'm focusing on first. And then I'll look at how it looks second. So how it reads is it should be conversational. So it really should kind of sound like you were talking to somebody else. Certainly when we write a report or proposal, it might be a little bit different. But for the most part, when you're doing everyday interoffice communications, whether it be a letter, memo, or email, you want to keep it conversational, just like you would talk to somebody else. So you don't want to all of a sudden become way formal, right? All of a sudden you're like, you sound like a lawyer or a doctor or something. Just be you, right? Talk how you would talk in the letter, in the email, in the memo. And that's what you don't want to do is you don't want to be too formal, but you also don't want to be too informal either. We want to keep it professional. So you certainly want to be aware of, if you're saying things like, hey guys, that's okay, but you might want to just be a little more professional, but don't sound stuffy and informal. And in your book, there's a great little sample where one person is extremely formal, please be advised that, it's like, that's not how you talk, the letter communication we sent you, we don't say that. We say we sent you the letter, right? So be aware that you're not too formal or informal. Secondly, along with that is positive. One thing that you'll learn when you're rewriting the sentences, you kind of covered this a little bit already, I think, in some of the sentences that you're looking at in your book, is you want to keep it positive, right? You don't want to focus on what can't be done or what's negative. There was a sample sentence, construction is brought to a halt because of the rain and weather, their soil is very soggy and we cannot pour the footings at this time. That's a statement. That is a true statement, but it's very negative, right? It's like what can't be done. We can't pour the footings. It's all soggy, and it's been brought to a halt because of it. Well, I can rephrase that to say something like construction will start soon once the soil dries, right? So it's the same information. I just said it in a positive way. So that's very much true of business writing. We want to be fostering goodwill. We want to be fostering relationships. Even when it's negative news or bad news, it can be brought to the person in a passive way that's not negative, that's positive, or that you're looking at the positive aspects of it. So you might say something like, unfortunately, we can't meet your request at this time. However, we can do this instead. And so you can shift to an alternate option for them. So be aware of things like negative words harsh words, can't things like can't, won't, couldn't, or whatever. And so we'll talk about that a little bit as we get into like the you-centered, which is I think the next thing. But be aware that you're not too harsh. I've noticed, especially when we're dealing with managerial communications, is some students look at themselves as a manager and as a leader or whatever, and so they feel like they can be a little bit harsh towards their employees. Some people kind of take more of the X type leader, where they're just like, hey, people need to be prodded, they need to be pushed, they need to be punished if they don't do right. And if you come in with that mentality, you kind of tend to be a little harsh. This if you don't abide by this new policy, you will be terminated immediately. Those kind of words. And those are very negative and those are very harsh. So be aware of that your document is positive and conversational. Next is clear and plain. So that you're not flowery, that you're not trying to impress, that you're not trying to be too descriptive and creative. Plain everyday language, clear everyday language not only makes it easy for everyone to understand and your message to be understood better, but also people of other cultures that may have English barriers, things like that. They're pretty good at basic, simple language, but you start getting flowery and very descriptive, they have a hard time following. So remember, we work in a very multicultural environment. So the clear and the plainest way to say it is always going to be the best. So that's how it reads. And then here's the one I'll talk about, you-centered. So we always want to write in such a way that is beneficial, or at least sounds beneficial to the reader, especially if we're dealing with, well, any audience, outside audience, inside audience. Outside audience is your suppliers and your customers. You want to make sure that you're writing in a way that makes whatever you're saying, whether it's positive or negative, sound to their best interest and benefit. And the same with your internal audiences, your employees, or your folks that work in the company or that are associated, that you would also put everything in terms of how can this benefit them. So rather than what we can or cannot do as the company, it's what's best for you and what you can do as the reader. And that's what we call being you-centered. So the sample here was, I think the one I like is it had to, I don't know if it's in your book or not, but it's basically, we're a company and we have a policy that we do not allow cash refunds for returned merchandise. We offer everyday name brands at discount prices, but we cannot give you cash refunds. So how do you say that in a way that's you-centered? I could say it in a me-centered way, like I could say, well, we cannot offer you cash refunds on return merchandise because we have a policy. And so I'm hiding behind my policy, and it's all about what I can or cannot do as the company. But if I want to make it more you-centered, I could say something like, to continue offering you, or so that you can continue to get name brands at discount prices, you can get store credit for returned merchandise, but not cash refunds. So I'm giving them the negative news, but after I've given them how this is all for their benefit. And so that's what we mean by you-centered. How does it benefit them? That's very important in business writing because you're constantly trying to establish and develop and build relationships in a business context. And then brief and short compared to long and unnecessary. Many times when we write, we actually add a lot of unnecessary words. We act what we have called what's called long lead-ins, things like this. I am writing this email to you today. Well, that's all unnecessary, right? Why is that? Because they can see that you're writing them an email because they're receiving it, right? So you don't have to say all that, that was what we mean by unnecessary. And then long, sometimes we just get a little wordy. I'll be honest with you, every single document that you'll be creating in this class shouldn't be more than 1 page. Half a page actually is even better. So 1/2 a page to 1 page. If you go over 1 page, even with all the headers and signature blocks and all that, it's too long. You need to edit it down to 1 page. And that's what we mean by brief and short. When you do a memo is typically put up on a bulletin board and people see it in the break room or around the company. It can't be 3 pages long because now you got 3 pages up on that bulletin board, and chances are somebody reading it are very slim. But if you can get it to a half page and it posts on a bulletin board, now they're going to read it, and now it's going to be the message is going to be received. So again, brief, short compared to long and unnecessary. All your documents should be short. And then, of course, when it comes to how it reads is your sentence types. So obviously, we'll learn about simple sentences, compound sentences, and complex compound sentences. And I think there's another one that is complex compound. Yeah, that's all of them. There's four different types, but anyway, simple sentences are easily retained by the reader. They remember them better, but they also sound a little choppy. Mike went to the store, and at the store, Mike bought a hat. And you can make them all short sentences, but it doesn't flow as nicely as using compounds like an and or a but and adding on a second, part of the sentence or an independent clause or whatever. So you'll learn about that, and the whole point here is you want to have clear, concise, simple sentences that aren't too long. And I think the biggest problem I see isn't so much that they're too short and choppy, it's that they're too long and drawn out. Some people really like the comma, so they keep adding a comma and adding onto their sentence more and more, and then all of a sudden you're like, you can't even read the whole sentence and comprehend because it's got so many commas and so much more information. So keep your sentences short. Ideally, around 20 words is good. That's where we find the sweet spot between not sounding choppy, but also being able to be understood and retained. So keeping that in mind, avoid long sentences that keep going on. That's probably the biggest problem I see in student writing. And then, of course, use proper grammar and punctuation. Be careful that we've not adopted some of our practices of texting or instant messaging, that we use shorthand, things like that. In our business documents, they should use full, complete sentences. Your bullet list should be statements, things like that. Or they could be single words, it depends on what it is. But point being is don't make your message, with shorthand and things like that. Make it complete sentences, not like a text message. And then use complete sentences. So not emojis, not shorthand. That's kind of what I mean by not text messages. Is use complete sentences in your statements. Be aware that that when I'm reading them, the spell checker and all that will check if the sentence is incomplete when I'm looking at it, and I can also read it too. Just so you know, though, I'm not an English instructor, and I'm not here to nitpick your grammar or your sentence structure and all that. I just read it like I would if I was a business person. And if it's chunky and choppy and all over the place, then I'll kind of start picking around at what's wrong with it. If it flows nicely and it's clear and simple, then you're doing great. So I'm not going to nitpick about your grammar and stuff as long as it's not blatantly obvious, right? And then, so again, complete sentences, beware of shorthand, emojis, stuff like that. And then parallel sentences. This is very important. Be careful that all the sentences have the same structure, that they're not, you're not talking about one thing and then shifting gears and it's something completely different. That in the example of parallel sentences is another sentence example. There was one that, it says Alma Contreras, the director of our southern branch, now will manage and now oversees the western region or something like that. Then the second part of the sentence says something like Mike Smith, the director of the Northwest region, now will oversee the entire East Coast. Well, it's the two parts of the sentence are saying somewhat of the same things, but they're not in the same order. One of them starts with the name, then the branch, then the region. The other one starts with the region, then the branch, then the name, or something like that. So to make it parallel means they would both follow the same order, and that's the way you do it. Or another way to describe it is each part of the sentence that's separated by a comma starts with the same kind of word, so either a verb or a noun or an adjective, and they all kind of follow that same format. You don't want one starting with a noun and then the next section starting with a verb and then the third section starting with an adverb. It kind of makes it less. It's not parallel then. So look at that in your book if you don't understand it still, and you'll understand it after that. And then proper structure for the document is very important. That you have structure in the document itself as far as some kind of introductory statement, some kind of body, and some kind of concluding statement. That is true in any document you write, whether it's an essay or a business document. And the fail on that is not having any structure. You just start, vomiting on the page everything you want to say, but there's no order to it. So make sure you've structured it, you've organized it. That's very helpful in how it reads. And that's where we talk about grouping like information together. So if you're talking about one topic in sentence one and then a different topic in sentence two or paragraph two, Then you jump to paragraph 3 and you're talking again about what you're talking in paragraph 1. Why not just put everything that relates to topic in paragraph 1, everything that relates to a different topic in paragraph 2, and organizing it in such a way. This is also true in how you lay it out on the page. You might have a situation where you're addressing a number of different groups of people, and you don't want to be talking to all three groups in all 6 paragraphs. Why don't you make the first group who you're talking to, and then you put a heading over that. This is the day shift employees. Then here's the second group I'm talking to. It's the swing shift employees and everything relevant to them. And now you've laid it out on your page where you have a little heading telling which group it's related to, and then a paragraph, or even better, a bullet list below that saying here's everything you need to know about the new changes that we're making. So organize it, make it where it's chunks of information that are relevant to each separate piece of the document that you are addressing. So that's very important in how it reads. And in your book, it talks about this. I think it's chapter 7 about improving your document's readability. And the first step, of course, is everything I've just mentioned here. Plus, this is a little extra, and then it'll get into how the document looks by increasing your white space and all that stuff. And I'll talk about that next. So anyway, that's pretty much it for how it reads in general. Does anybody have any questions about any of that? Does that make sense? Okay. And I'm going to continue on with how it looks. So very important. Business documents are single-spaced paragraphs, not double-spaced. So if you give me a document that's double-spaced, that's automatically going to be a low score because business writing is always single-spaced. Now, there is a problem that students run into here. And that is that there is paragraph settings within your word processor software. So if it's Microsoft Word you're using, if you go to the paragraph setting and you select, it actually gives you kind of the line spacing before and after the paragraphs. And sometimes that's default already set to like 6 or 8. Well, that'll show kind of like it's single space, but not really single space, a little bit more space than single. And I'll mark you down for that too. So make sure that your paragraph line spacing before and after paragraph is set to 0. Now you're set for true single spaced. And then type your paragraph. And then your spaces between the paragraph will also be true single spaced. If you use the line before and after the paragraph, sometimes it's not quite a full space, and it looks that way in the document. So single-spaced paragraphs. Double-spaced is a no-no. The only thing in all of business writing, so catch this, that is double-spaced is the title block of a memo. That's it. Everything else is single-spaced. Letter, all the address blocks, single-spaced. All the signature blocks at the end of your documents, single-spaced. The document itself, single-spaced, but separated by spaces. And what I mean by that is in between the paragraphs, you want to have space. Paragraphs should be short, single-spaced, but a space between paragraphs. So not like, I end this paragraph halfway through the line and then I start the next paragraph right below it, tabbed in 1/2 inch. In fact, there is no tab-ins in business writing. It's short, single-spaced paragraphs separated by a space, no indented first line, and your document should never be all one paragraph. So in other words, you have the salutation, then you go right into the body of message without any spaces, and then you have the sincerely without any space, and then you have your typed name below that. That's never how business writing is. Everything should be separated by space. So your salutation, then a space, then the body of your message, and if the body of your message happens to be, even kind of short, maybe 5 or 6 sentences, you can break that into 2 shorter paragraphs. That makes it easier to read. 1 long paragraph, even if it's 8 lines, is still harder to read than 2 or 3 short paragraphs. So keep that in mind when it comes to the readability of your document. Short paragraphs by far trump all the rest. So keep them short. Now, if you have a long document, you can't do that because it'll look like a bunch of lines down the page. You can do longer paragraphs, but in a short document, use even shorter than 8 lines. But the ideal is around 8 lines max on a longer document. So keep it that way. That's the way it looks more readable. And then, of course, your proper formatting is extremely important. So some students, I'll say, send me a memo, and they just type something on a page, and it's not formatted like a memo, and I'll give them a 0 and say, please format this like a memo. And in your book, there are samples throughout the book of letters. There's samples of memos, and there's samples of emails. And I also provide samples in all of the writing assignments that you're going to do. There should be no reason why you don't format it properly. But keep in mind, it is strict. So there are rules to formatting your document. There are rules for letters, there's rules for emails, and there's rules for memos. And that's what I intend to pass on to you in this class. For instance, memos and memos and letters should be on a document, and they should have 1 inch margins all the way around for the most part. They should have some kind of title block, whether the memo title block or whether you use the address blocks, return and inside address for the letter or a letterhead. And then also the signature block on a letter is pretty much the name and title of the person that is writing the letter with room for a signature. The signature block on a memo is non-existent. There is no signature block on a memo, just the initials of the author who is mentioned in the title block at the top. So I'll show you samples of all those documents in this Zoom session, but I just want you to make note that I will be very strict on how you format the document. And that's what I'm hoping to pass on to you. If somebody says to you, write a memo, you know how to lay it out. And even an email, as much as you go, well, I know how to do email, it's already all automatically done. Yeah, that's true. Not necessarily, though, because you still have the signature block of an email. And a business email's signature block should always include full contact information. Because if you're dealing in a business environment and somebody gets an email they don't understand or that they disagree with or they're troubled by, you want to make it easy for them to call you, right? So that you can rectify that situation. So your phone number should be included, your extension should be included, your title should be included. All that's in a email signature block. And we'll go over that as well. All right, the font size of your document. This is very important. We get used to being very creative and using large fonts. Large fonts are fine for headings and titles, but the body of your message should be no larger than 12 and no smaller than 10. Sometimes we squeeze out 9s and 8s because we're trying to cram a lot of information, but that's going to make it a lot harder for people to read. So to make it more readable and to look better, 10 to 12 is your goal. Definitely, you should use headings when you can. Sometimes headings can be even on a short document. You have 3 groups you're going to address. Put a heading for each group, right? And that way you're going to address each one separately. Utilize headings. They're an easy way to kind of help people navigate down your page as to what's coming. It usually gives a little preview of what's in the next paragraph. So a lot of times they can just read the headings and they get the gist of the document, and then they can also read the areas that they feel are relevant to them, because maybe not all areas are. So utilize headings. Also use bullet lists and numbered lists. These are great ways, excellent ways to take a paragraph of information where everything is lost and make it very easy for somebody to read. Especially if it's any kind of list of anything, you should make it an actual list. There's an assignment you guys are going to be doing where you're going to be asking for some information from a hotel because your company is planning a retreat. And it's all these questions. Well, put those questions in a list, right? Why put them in a paragraph? It's going to be really hard for your reader to break out all those questions. Make it easy for them. Make it a list. And then they can actually go through and make it like a checklist. As they're answering each one of those, they can check them off. Bullet lists should be used whenever there's not a sequence to follow or numbers to follow. Step 1, step 2, step 3 should be put in a numbered list. But if it's just a random list, of any information, then you might put it in a bullet list instead of a numbered list. Always use text design, things like bold, italic, underline, even all caps. Now, I know a lot of you in the presentation one, you said don't use all caps on your slides. Yeah, no, I mean, yes, because it does sound like you're shouting, but all caps is a great way to really make something important stand out, especially if you bold it. And in the case of the parking memo that I mentioned earlier with swing shift, day shift employees, I'll show you a sample. But one of the requirements is that the employees must get a white sticker, or they will be ticketed. They have to have a parking sticker. And so it says, and most people do it correctly. They'll put it in all caps, bold. Without a white sticker, you will get a ticket, right? That's something you don't want them to miss. You don't want them to go, well, I never saw anything about a ticket, because you hit it in a paragraph, right, with the plain text. No, make it stand out so that way people see it. And that's the whole idea of using bold, italics, underlines, and all caps, is you want your document to be scannable. You want their eyes to grab things as they move down the page. And bold really works excellent. Sometimes italics does too, especially if it's some unique statement. all dates, all times, all numbers, all that kind of stuff should always be put in bold text so that it pops and stands out. And then even underline, sometimes underline needs to be said because it's something you want to really emphasize, or all caps again, and underline and bold all together really makes it stand out. So use those things and use them liberally, even in letters, even in emails, because it allows your document to be more readable. And if you notice in all the emails I send you, I demonstrate this. I use lists, I use bold text, I underline things. This is a way to really make your document more visibly readable and easy to scan. And then again, it should fit on one page. Unless you need to use like 30 to 40% of the next page, then go ahead and use a second page. So one page documents are always much more appealing than anything longer. But of course, some things just have to be multiple pages. But here's the general rule. Don't give me one sentence on another page, right? If you only have one sentence on the other page, edit it down so it fits on one page, right? Same thing. Even if it's a paragraph on the next page, can I edit this down to get it to fit on one page? Because that's going to make it more visually appealing and easier for people to read. Now, again, some documents are multiple pages, but even so, in that document, if you have a section that's going to roll over one sentence into another page, edit it down so that it fits neatly on 4 pages or 6 pages or whatever it is. But that's very important. And then one thing that business writing does, especially in reports and proposals and things like that, is they utilize graphic items. They use pictures, they use tables, they use pie charts. They do things to make the document visually appealing. So if you look at a really well done business report, it's going to show a pie chart. It's going to show maybe a photo of the item or product that you're trying to sell or promote. It's going to show pictures of people using the product. It's that's what makes a business document unique. It's not just text, right? You utilize other things to make it more visually appealing. So feel free to do that in your document. And that is pretty much it for the do's and don'ts of business documents. Now, I'm going to make a little caveat here. I basically did your discussion post for you in this assignment by you coming and watching this video or being here right now. However, you still need to follow the instructions of the video or of the assignment. So the assignment says that you need to make an initial list. So you might want to just make an initial list if you've not done so already. And then look at other students' lists and refine your list, and then put your final list up the last week that the assignment is going. So this week I think this is the first week for this, but either way, when that assignment is due, make sure you publish a final list. Don't do it all in the same day. You'll lose 5 points right off the bat. Initial list, comments on others can be on the same day, or initial list and then comments on others in the final list can be on the same day. But don't do it all in the same day. The idea is that you're looking at other students and you're refining your list. But your final list could be my list, and that's acceptable, and you'll get, higher score if you do that. So, all right. Any questions before I move on?
Quick question. Are I did not do my initial list separated like this because you just said top 10, so I just kind of combined the two lists. Is that going to get us knocked down on points?
Not necessarily, but ideally you would put it into two lists. That one's how it reads and one is how it looks. So even if those are 5 things on each one.
Okay.
Yeah, I know I said top 10. I should just say top and get rid of the 10 because there is more. But then again, I'm just looking for the key ones in here. As long as you have ones that I've put here, you're probably fine. So yeah, I wouldn't worry too much about it. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
All right, I'm going to move on then to demonstrate or show you some other documents, just to give you a sample of what I mean by readable and scannable. So let me look at a few here. So here is this is an email. So let me put that up. Okay, so you guys can see that email. Now this is actually taken out of, it might even be your textbook here. I don't remember where I got it, but this is an email, right? So you might say, oh, what do I need to know about an email that's so important? Well, a couple things. And this is a good sample. Just want to point out a couple of things. First off, and this is what we call good email, and it tells you why it's good to the right here. But your subject line is extremely important in an email. And you want to make sure that your subject line is not too vague, but also not revealing anything that you're trying to build up to. Because If you remember, we talked a little bit about the indirect strategy. So if you're doing a message that's using the indirect strategy, that means you're holding off on the news that you're going to share until after you've kind of built up your audience to be prepared for it. Well, if you mention it in your in your subject line, now you've revealed it already. So sometimes you need to be a little vague, but be specific. Just don't be short. Don't just say things like meeting or information, stuff like that. You want to give them a little preview, and many people decide whether or not to even read the email by the subject line. So that's very important. Same thing with the name of your attachments. Make sure it's clear what you're attaching. You should always have a salutation in an email. Some people skip that in an email because they think, oh, it's an email. We can just talk back and forth almost like texting. But actually, an email is a business document. So you want to use a salutation. Very important. All salutations and all documents end in a colon. That is the appropriate way to end a salutation, not a comma. Even though your spell checker will allow you to do a comma, it's actually a colon. And this is the one thing that I'm constantly correcting. Every student does comma, and I have to tell them colon. Very important. You want to use numbered lists and bullet lists. So here, this particular document is all about an event that's coming up at a fair, and they want to get people to be involved. So they have a list of things that they can do. So they used a numbered list. That makes the document a lot easier to read. Imagine that was all in one paragraph. Now I can just look at each line and read it. They did use some bold text, sponsorship fee, logo, booth size. Those are things I'm really interested in. So I want to make sure I make those stand out. I believe, and then they have some actually italics down here as well. That those are the things your eye catches, and that makes your document more scannable and readable. And then the biggest thing, however, on an email is the signature block. Notice how they used a full signature block. So they have their name, their title, the company, and then they have their office phone, in this case, mobile phone. If they had an extension, they should include that. Then they have their email address. Now, it doesn't need to look just like that. It can all be in one paragraph at the bottom, but always use a full signature block. So here's a sample. This is a good email. It has the use of text design. It has the use of bullet lists. It's laid out nicely. It has a full signature block. So this is what we mean by how the document looks. It's not just one huge paragraph of text. That would be awful, right? In fact, let me show you. I think I have it in modules here. I have a PowerPoint I did on memos. And actually, it's in this week's module. So if you want to take a look at it, you can. But I'll let me just show this to you for a minute. Stop sharing what I was sharing, and I'm going to go to this teaching demonstration. So you should be seeing it now. But this is the importance of formatting a memo properly. And this is really a good, quick overview of business writing. But I want you to know, the average day we get about 121 emails on average. That's quite a bit. And people check their emails all day long. So what if you got an email, that looked like you're a busy worker and you get an email that looks like this? I mean, we're going to be like, I don't want to read that. I'm not going to read it. Like I'm going to, unless it's from somebody really important, I ain't going to read it. I'm going to put it off for another time because it's intimidating. It's all big, one big paragraph. Nothing is made to stand out. It's like, it's demoralizing to get an email like that. And that's why what we're pointing out here, or even the memo that looks like that, or one that looks like that, like an essay, right? It's like the same thing. It's not doing anything to appeal to visually to me. And so that's why I'm mentioning to you, busy business people want things to, be able to view that are pleasant to the eyes and make you want to read it versus not reading it at all. So that was a email. Let me give you, here's a memo. You guys should be seeing that. So here's a memo formatted like a memo. It has a full title block on it. Again, the only thing in business writing that is double spaced is a memo title block. That's exactly how the title block should look. And, this is a floating holiday. This was the assignment I changed from you guys doing to a new one. Yours is now a letter to the CEO. But notice this is a message about floating holidays. Well, I put floating holidays in bold. And, I can just read the next line. Each will provide 2 annual floating. So what is a floating holiday? It says right here, And then here are details. And notice all the details are put in a easy to read bullet list. Now, if I had done that in a paragraph, it would be I'd have to read the whole thing. Now I can just scan right down the bullet list and I can see what it is, and I can be taken any time. There's no blackout periods. It doesn't accrue. I don't have to read the whole thing. I can just read the bold letters, right? Unused days are paid at the end of the year. There's an additional standard holidays already given, so these are in addition to that. I could have did bold in every sentence to make the keywords stand out, and it would have been easy to just scan that list, reading the bold words only, and I would have got what I needed to know. So again, and then a memo has the initials of the author. So I'm the author, and have my initials at the bottom. So that's a memo. And again, I used text design, I used headings and bullet lists all to make my document more readable and scannable. And this is for every business document, not just memos, not just emails, even letters. So I'll show you a couple of letters. Oh, here's another memo I want to show you, parking memo. This is the one I talked about. So again, we're formatted like a memo. All employees, day shift employees, swing shift employees. So I have all three groups addressed. So if I'm an employee, all employee, I'm going to read this and notice right in the middle, it must have a white sticker visible to avoid getting a ticket, but they're going to have a registration date on these dates so that you can get a ticket. But I'm not a day shift employee, so I don't care what's going on with them, but I am swing shift. What is my rules? Well, I can park on the curb before 3:30. I can use any empty space after 3:30, except those that are marked such. All right, that's all I need to know. I don't even need to read the day shift stuff. Who cares? That's not relevant to me. They made this very easy. Now, some students put this all in one paragraph and it's all lost. No, break it out like this. This makes it visually appealing and it makes it much more easy to read. And that's what we mean by how it looks. I'll give you one more sample, that of a letter. And this letter's not perfect. This is just a decent one. So this one is formatted properly, although the top margin is a little large. But it has a return address block or letterhead, has a date line. Date line typically is actually butted up against the return address block. Then you have an inside address block. Then you have the salutation. And then you have, the letter. Now, again, they've used very short paragraphs, and they used a nice bullet list here. The only thing, and then the signature block has room for a signature. It has the name, the company, the title of the person. They have the company name, and then they have the office number. You don't really need the phone number because typically it's in the letterhead if you use the letterhead. But in this case, because the return address didn't include a letterhead or a return phone number, you could put it there. That's acceptable. The only thing missing in this is they didn't utilize any text design. They didn't use any bold text, any underlined text. So I would go back to make this better, and I would put something bold in every single paragraph. That way they can just scan the bold words and get the gist of the message. So, but the letter is formatted nicely, and they did use a bullet list, which was nice. There's another letter I have here. Let's see if I can find it. Maybe I closed it. Must have closed it. Go back here to Word. Yeah, what I did with that letter. I had a letter open, so let me go back here. I had one more letter to show you. Let's just do letter good. Here we go. This one also didn't utilize text design. I know why I can't see it because it's in Acrobat, but I should be able to see it now. Huh, there we go. All right, here's one more letter for you guys. So again, this one does use a letterhead, has a date line, has an inside address, it has the salutation, and then this one decided to use. So they want to know more about learning about social media jobs. That's in the first line. I probably would have made that bold. They're actually exploring hiring a social media manager or specialist. But they have some questions. They have some questions on recruitment and selection. So they have the questions in bullet points listed below that. They want to have some questions on a specific job detail. So then they put on a bullet list those questions along with some thoughts. So this is great the way that it's laid out. It's got a full signature block at the bottom with name, signature, and then type name and title. And they also could put the company name if you want. The only thing lacking again is text design. There is no bold, no italic. There is some underline. So I would have made those two headings bold and underlined, and then I would pull out something in every single paragraph and make it bold. So that way it pops out and stands out, and it makes it even easier for the person to scan and read it. So, so those are some samples for you to kind of chew on and to think about when you begin to prepare your business documents. So that's pretty much all I want to say. This is kind of what I'm looking for in all of your writing assignments. First and foremost, that you follow the assignment instructions. Secondly, that you format your document like the document that you're creating. And then thirdly, that you utilize text design and to improve the readability and skim value of your document. These are things that you wouldn't normally do in an English class, or any other kind of business write or any other kind of writing class. So this is business writing, and I want to make sure that you utilize those things to enhance your documents. So, all right, any questions before we end the Zoom session?
I have a quick question. Just a little bit ago, when you talked about how you changed our assignment, you said that we were writing a letter to the CEO, but the assignment says it's an interoffice memo. So,
Correct. It is a memo. I apologize, but
okay, I just wanted to clarify.
it is a memo to the CEO. Yeah, sorry, I said letter, but I meant to say memo. Yeah, you were going to do the floating holiday memo, but I used that in BUS24 and I wanted to do one that was more managerial. So I selected a new one out of your textbook, which is right. As a manager, you're writing to your CEO. So, yes. But again, you're going to format it like a memo and you're going to utilize text design and then you're going to write that document. Actually, the document is already written for you, but you need to edit it down and organize it a little better so that you're not really writing anything. You're actually reorganizing it and then formatting it like a memo and then adding text design to make it very readable and scannable. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
All right. Any other questions? It can be about other stuff too with the course. Just to let you know, on your individual presentations, I usually give kind of a week for everybody to get theirs finally uploaded. I give them a little extra time if they run into a problem because some students did. And then I give you, kind of the week to comment, view other students' presentations. And then typically the start of next week, I'll get in there and start grading them. And I grade them based off of whether or not they've commented on other students. If they haven't, I skip over them and I go to the ones that have. And I'll go through the whole list of students' presentations, grading all the ones watching, viewing myself, and grading all the ones that gave their presentation and then commented on two other students' presentations. And then anyone who's not done that, I'll give them. You have till the end of the semester to do it, but I won't grade yours until you do that. Just so you know. All right. Well, I'm going to stop recording.